There you go, Bruce.
Okay. Well, we have a couple of review lessons today, which is lesson 112. And we've already covered those a bit, so I thought I'd kind of review them briefly. But lesson 112 has, for the review of two lessons, light and joy and peace abide in me, which is 93. And it goes, I am the home of light and joy and peace. I welcome them into the home I share with God because I'm a part of him. And as we know, well, which we'll get into in a moment, he uses this as an opportunity to point out the contrast between what we really are and what we think we are as the home of evil, darkness, and sin. That now classic cliche line, right? And then 94, which is, I am as God created me. I will remain forever as I was, created by the changeless like himself. And I am one with him and he with me. And those are very, affirmative statements about our true reality, kind of level one statements, I suppose you could say. But 93 in particular really immediately dives in, as we recall, to the difference between sometimes the gaping gulf. It's really a little gap, but we think of it as this enormous canyon between the capital S self we really are and the little s self that we believe ourselves to be. So in lesson 93, after the title gives us as we've learned, a great hint at what's to come, he immediately says, well, you've got some remedial work to do because you think you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. You think if anyone could see the truth about you, he would be repelled, recoiling from you as if from a poisonous snake. You think if what is true about you were revealed to you, you would be struck with horror so intense that you would rush to death by your own hand, living on after seeing this being impossible. So, right off the bat there, I looked up cognitive dissonance on Wikipedia. Is anyone familiar with that term? I think it's really useful because it's a psychological term that I think really, nails it. And Wikipedia's definition says, in the field of psychology, cognitive dissonance occurs when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, or participates in an action that goes against one of these three, and experiences psychological stress because of that. According to this theory, when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, people do all in their power to change them until they become consistent. And of course, that applies to both the ego and the Holy Spirit, both doing everything they can to reinforce their respective thought systems. The discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with new information perceived, wherein they try to find a way to resolve the contradiction to reduce their discomfort. And it goes on from there, but I thought, well, that's a pretty good starting point because, the belief is really the cause. And that's, the belief in separation, because of course Miracles tells us, it's a pure non-dual thought system. There absolutely anything other than pure non-duality is something we're dreaming. And so anything that comes to us from the dream that causes discomfort can be traced back to that one decision in the mind to believe in the silly, seemingly separate self's idea of separation. So I thought what might be interesting to do is I did a little search. I don't have a Big Red here in California with me, but I do have the Miracle Distribution Center website, which has a great little search tool. And I found plenty of things. There's 21 references in the course that it can find, the 3 volumes, to the word fight. So I thought I'd start with chapter 23 and the irreconcilable beliefs, because that's really it seemed like a really good place to look at the core issue. And in the very first section of chapter 23, it says, the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict, for a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. And right off the bat, it's kind of like slowing the mind down. Does anyone experience that when you read sentences like that? you kind of like, oh yeah, eternal gentleness. I mean, if we just kind of let those words soak in and realize that that's really what we want, then the cognitive dissonance is real obvious, and we can contrast that with the stuff that we do in our everyday minds, running around doing stuff. I did a little, pharmacy and grocery run for my mom this morning, and then I just got a text from my sister saying that, just like 5 minutes ago, saying that she thinks that her husband may have the symptoms of COVID-19. So there's all this stuff and they're doing the isolation thing at home, and all these things just like tempting us to get really involved and identified with the stuff in the world. And doesn't mean we don't respond appropriately and with kindness and with the guidance that we're given to do whatever we can within the context of the dream to respond with kindness. But if we can remember that we always have that teacher 24/7, 365 that guides us back to that eternal gentleness, that peace, that's, I think, pretty important. Any thoughts on that so far? Anyone? Nope. Okay. Well, I'll go on. Let me read that first sentence over again, because I think it really is helpful. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict, for a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. The means of war are not the means of peace, and what the warlike would remember is not love. War is impossible unless belief in victory is cherished. And of course, for there to be a victory, there has to be a victor and a vanquished. There has to be duality. And I think that's why, the Course says, consciousness is the beginning of duality, because as long as there's an other, then there's a conflict. And the Holy Spirit is leading us through the practice of forgiveness to the place in our mind that we really never left, that remembers and knows somewhere deep inside our mind that duality is just a silly game we made up, and it's it's really pretty pathetic when we look at it, not in a condemning way, but just kind of, if you can kind of, I try to remember throughout the day to just look at all the stuff that I do and the stuff that I think my life is about, and just kind of take it with a not a grain of salt, but a giant block of salt as much as I can, and just say, wow, I mean, all the things that I think are important within a week or a year or a decade or two, they're going to seem like I was upset about that. I was all, wrapped around the axle about this and that and the other. And, all the conflicts and all the conflicting goals and the craziness, really, it seems like it all stems back to that one decision. And yet we keep covering it over with things in the world, whether it's other people or circumstances, whether it's a virus or world finances or isolation or an email or a text or a phone call, or it's countless things that can seem to disrupt our peace, but they're really in disguise. I was remembering this morning, the classic line, of all the things that I'm going to paraphrase it because I usually do that. Of all the many causes of your suffering, your guilt wasn't among them, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, that's not usually where we go to, but ultimately that's what I think our guidance reminds us, that all the wars that we seem to fight, all the battles that seem to confront us, really are nothing more than the unwillingness to look without condemnation, but with the Holy Spirit at our unconscious, unfounded guilt, and use the forgiveness classroom to let it go. And so we need all those grievances as feedback to get back to the mind and look at the stuff that's coming up moment to moment and just say, oh, I could choose peace instead of this. And I'm not upset for the reason I think. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Peggy Lee, did you have a question or a comment before?
Oh, no, I didn't. I was I'm just using this phone, which I don't know how to use, and I was trying to see everybody because I lost everybody, and now I'm good.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thanks.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Bruce, I had a comment about the cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
Just like, the ego itself is in conflict,
Mhm.
and that's uncomfortable. And so the cognitive dissonance itself is in conflict, and that's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So both of those things push us toward wanting ever greater peace.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So we get clues everywhere, don't we? I mean, yeah, moment to moment to moment, anything that's less than perfect peace can be used as a way to get back to the mind, and particularly to the decision-making faculty in the mind that looks past the form and gets back to the place in the mind where we know that it's at some level, it's not about anyone else, anything else. It's always about a choice that I made to believe that I'm separate. It's not even the you know, it's not even the specific ideas. It's just the belief that we think that's possible.
We don't, I was thinking how we don't get up in the morning thinking we're going to war.
Right.
Well, we don't use those words, but we certainly get out of bed thinking about, I mean, if we're in ego mode, what needs to be done, who needs to be fixed, who the bad guys are, who are the bad guys from last night's news.
Right, exactly.
What did they do today? Whatever.
Mhm.
Who isn't doing what they should be doing, whatever. But yeah, I mean, he's pretty literal calling it war.
We fire up the blame thrower at every opportunity, even though, or maybe it's a sword, pick your weapon, but that the Holy Spirit always keeps gently asking, so how did that sword get back in your hand? How did that blame thrower, dripping little drops of fire, ready for the next kill. How did that get back in my hand? Oh, well, maybe I put it there because no one else did.
At the same time, Bruce, I really appreciate you referencing this section because the lighthearted approach in this and about this crazy mad idea of the war with God kind of gets condensed in the next paragraph, and God thinks otherwise.
Yeah, do you want to read that paragraph?
I kind of like how he encapsulates that you may think this is a war and this is a big deal, but nah, maybe not.
Exactly. Do you want to read that paragraph, Jonathan?
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay.
Do you not realize a war against yourself would be a war on God? Is victory conceivable? And if it were, is this a victory that you would want? The death of God, if it were possible, would be your death. Is this a victory? The ego always marches to defeat because it thinks that triumph over you is possible, and God thinks otherwise. This is no war, only the mad belief the will of God can be attacked and overthrown. You may identify with this belief, but never will it be more than madness, and fear will reign in madness and will seem to have replaced love there. This is the conflict's purpose, and to those who think that it is possible, the means seem real. Kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger, so I don't know if we can stop there. But...
yeah. That the word that jumped out at me as you were reading that was purpose, and I was thinking that's one of the things that in one of Ken Wapnick's audios we were hearing. He was talking about Eastern mysticism that talks about the world being illusion, and the Eastern tradition covers that pretty well and gives us at least part of the foundation. But what the Course adds to it is the purposive nature of the ego, and that's basically is to obscure and to hide our mindfulness that allows us to see not only the illusion and the ego's complicity in fabricating that dream, but also to see that it was made by that unconscious, unfounded guilt. And if we can look, at that and not cringe, and just see that it's silly. Ultimately, it's not evil, sinful, or wicked. Like that opening line of Workbook Lesson 93 suggests. It's just silly. Like Ken says, though, it's purposive, and that we think we made up this world, and we did it because we think we threw God under the bus. We think we shattered perfect oneness and destroyed the pure non-dual reality that we all share. And thinking that, even if it's just partly unconscious, although I think for most of us, we're showing, I think it's unconscious most of the time, until we start really looking at all the stuff that comes back to us as feedback from the feedback loop, and see this like, okay, this is just a wake-up call to show me that I'm still believing in the unconscious unfounded guilt, and that's the ego's purpose, is to keep us mindless and to keep the curtain drawn.
Just to point out, Ken Wapnick said, there were a lot of things in the course that pushed Helen Schuckman's buttons, but this one really did. The line Jonathan pointed out, and God thinks otherwise. So in the midst of all this seeming war and conflict and virus, finances crashing and oil prices dropping, and then he would throw in that line, and God thinks otherwise, and Helen would go crazy. Like any good healthy ego would go crazy. Yeah, but look at what's happening. Yeah, but look at this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Of course, the ultimate would be that God knows nothing about any of it, nor does he think about it much. So that kind of blows the whole idea of sin, guilt, and fear kind of out the window, because if God really did involve himself with any of it, then I would be in trouble.
Exactly. If this were the real world, God would be cruel. Yeah. Exactly. Which is not something that I would probably say to a beginning course student.
Exactly.
It's tough for all of us to handle that, because we really think that there's some mileage we're going to get left in the world. Well, if I just try this approach, maybe I can make the world work a little better for me, and then it'll make me happy.
But also, like Gary Renard mentions, I think in Disappearance of the Universe, he found it a happy thought that God had nothing to do with all the craziness in the world, because now you can have a sane God to go back home to.
Exactly.
But there is quite an adjustment to blaming God for all the stuff that we think is going on in a dream. So, not to take that away too early. Is that what you're saying, Bruce?
Well, I think we're doing it all at the perfect pace, and we're already home in exile. So whatever pace we're doing at is fine. But the Course does remind us, that we're wasting time, and I think you were pointing out the other day, Lynn, that we deprive ourselves needlessly of opportunities to gladden ourselves. We read that one. Yeah, that's a great reminder, huh?
So what would you say to a beginning course student?
It's about mindfulness and kindness, and a deeper level of kindness, maybe something like that. I don't know.
Eternal gentleness.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like that. I'll have to add that to my list of elevator speeches. Yeah.
If you start to accept this, you will not be hurled up and swept into oblivion. So that's where the Course reminds us that it's with us in that gentleness. I agree, Tim. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Bill Wilson, who wrote a book about the 12 steps called the 12 and 12. He says in there, if alcoholics knew what they were getting into when they came in, they would never hang out. They would never stay. You think it's all about alcoholism. Nah, it's about challenging every belief you've ever had about anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly true with the Course.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Anyone want to read the third paragraph of chapter 23?
I got it. I'm up. Be certain that it is impossible God and the ego or yourself and it will ever meet. You seem to meet and make your strange alliances on grounds that have no meaning. For your beliefs converge upon the body, the ego's chosen home, which you believe is yours. You meet at a mistake, the body, an error on your self-appraisal. The ego joins with an illusion of yourself you share with it, and yet illusions cannot join. They are the same, and they are nothing. Their joining lies in nothingness. Two are as meaningless as one or as 1,000. The ego joins with nothing, being nothing. The victory it seeks is meaningless as is itself. No wonder Ken said this was the worst chapter in the whole book.
Is that what he said?
with no relief at all. Just bam and then bam.
Oh, well. Well, fortunately, we can go back to love and peace and joy, you know, like peace and joy abide in me, right? Yeah, it is just challenging, but you know, we're here to do that work, and it's a major discipline to really look at our minds. But boy, the benefits! I've been thinking a lot about, well, Dave and I in particular have been listening to a lot of just brilliant concert pianists online and sharing links and things. And it could be any profession or any gift or art that you see and admire, someone who's really mastered their craft. But you think about the discipline required to attain that level of proficiency. And in a sense, I think Jesus is saying, hey, and even the Bible didn't mess that one up too bad, these things I do, you too shall do, and greater, right? And so in other words, if we're actually in this program and he says that we're equals, he just happens to have accepted nothing but Holy Spirit's curriculum, and we're still waffling. We're still working with that cognitive dissonance and moment to moment saying, well, yeah, okay, I'll try it a little more, and then we go back to thinking we're going to get some kind of mileage or some kind of benefit out of the ego strategy, and we keep picking up the sword again and say, oh gosh, that really isn't that much fun. And eventually we learn to generalize and see that that's not working out for us. But,
there's a young group of singers online, and they're singing True Colors, the song by Cyndi Lauper. And it really feels like when I hear it, that it's Jesus singing to me. Like, you think you're in this darkness and you think you're in this war with me. And you think, you're walking around with sad eyes, kind of obsessed with all this seeming darkness. And yet I see your true colors. I see the light of God shining through you. Mm-hmm. It's really beautifully done. I watch and I'm just so touched every time I hear it. And I feel like it's Jesus singing it to me, singing it to all of us, especially in the midst of all this craziness. So if you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube.
Okay. Maybe
it just occurred to me that, I have moments where I see that, where I'm starting to get where everything is communicating with me. God is in, and you just reminded me of that, like to really realize God is communicating to me all the time and through everything. It's always helping me.
Yeah.
There, and whether I realize it or not. So if I could transfer that feeling like you're talking about, that if I could transfer that, like those really amazing moments where there's a song and then just to transfer that to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a concept, huh? Yeah. And that I think is really, what we're being asked, not to do all at once, but to gradually, look at how miserable the ego has made us and use the cognitive dissonance from that, and then use that as a motivation for a gentle, an eternally gentle discipline that really just says, I don't have to be a masochist. I don't have to be a martyr. I don't have to be a victim. I can see peace instead of this. And we could use, like you were saying, Susan, every single opportunity as a trigger or a mnemonic device or a way to get back to the mind, and in particular that decision maker that says, I really only have one decision to make between two thought systems or two teachers, and one of them is completely insane, 100% insane, and never leads to peace when I look at it accurately and assess it honestly, and the other is completely sane and always leads to peace. And so if we can, I find little acronyms and mnemonic devices helpful. Like I use GIST as one: guilt, individuality, space, and time. I figure if anything involves any of those four, guilt, individuality, space, or time, and I'm making a big deal out of any of those things. Of course, guilt being the whole thought system of sin, guilt, fear, and ego's shenanigans. In any of those things, it can be clues that I'm betting on the wrong dead horse again. So, but it could be a song lyric. It could be, just something anything that triggers something can be a reminder to look at the opportunity. See, there's two thought systems going on, and I can always use those as a triggering device. So, does anyone else have favorite mechanisms for that?
Bruce, I wondered, you were talking about a mnemonic device?
Uh-huh.
Is that how you spell it?
It's MMEMONIC. It's just something to jog your memory. In other words, it could be anything.
I like acronyms.
Yeah, acronyms are fun.
Yeah.
But it could be a word that means something to you.
Okay.
So a lot of times now when I see the word death, for example, I think of birth as being the opposite, and those are both two sides of the illusion of the space-time of bodies and things that come and go. But if I kind of put it in that perspective, it's like, oh yeah, So for example, you can use words that you see frequently and then align your thinking to a course-related concept for those words. So that's something I find really helpful, is just basically, take something that lifts me out of the battleground by using a memory training wheel kind of a thing to just get back to that decision-making place in the mind.
When I think of the Holy Spirit, I think of a homing pigeon.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. Kind of, it's fun.
Yep, exactly.
I was thinking about what Susan was saying, when you go real world, it's like everything is a mnemonic device. I mean, you're seeing them everywhere all the time. Exactly. Everything. Expletives are a mnemonic device. Oh, darn. Oh, crap.
As long as I don't hear God's voice coming through the television, I'm okay.
Well, actually, I like to watch movies and TV and use that as it's like, okay, which thought system am I resonating with? You can watch, if you happen to find yourself in a scary movie or something that where it's like ego on steroids, you can say, oh, well, look at that. Isn't that how crazy my ego is when I indulge in that and not see any differences?
Gets really into the observer quickly, right?
Yeah. And if we can nurture that observer and recognize that the part of us that's watching is really that decision maker. And if that part doesn't identify with it, if we can look without condemnation at the stuff that's going on, whether it seems to be out there in the world or in our own mind, it's really all in our own mind. And that those mnemonic devices can, bring it back in and help us trigger an awareness that says, oh yeah, that's right. I could see peace instead of this. I'm not upset for the reason I think. It's not about the movie I'm watching. It's not about the text I just got from my sister. It's not about, the whatever my bank account has in it, or whether or not I've been exposed to a virus, or, all the stuff that anything that involves guilt, individuality, space, and time, you go back to that little mnemonic device. It could be anything that we find helps us get our mind above the battleground with Jesus. Doesn't mean that we stop doing the things in the world that we would normally be doing, but we do them with Jesus instead of just on our own with the ego, picking up the sword and slashing and burning and trying to make our way through a dark maze. Earlier, I think what we read kind of reminded me of, not only above the battleground is such a great metaphor, but I think a maze, like a little mouse maze. Because each one of these little rectangular or square compartments of the maze seems to be isolated and cut off, kind of like an office, a sea of cubicles in a corporate office. We think we're all separate, and now with the quarantine and social distancing and all that, it seems like that's on steroids. And yet in truth, bodies never join. And minds are always joined, and the Course keeps reminding us. So now we have really a golden opportunity to look at that big time and see how we really can, just like we're doing right now, reach out. We seem to be using a tool called Zoom and various technologies to talk to each other, but it's just one mind talking to itself, taking the form of a couple dozen people, whatever it is, sharing something that we find helpful and inspiring. So it's never left the mind.
We're all walking mnemonic devices. Abby, did you have something?
I was just thinking of my favorite mnemonic device that my sister and I use is JAFFO, JAFFO, just another friggin' forgiveness opportunity.
Oh, you would add an adjective to it. I hadn't got the extra F in my. I actually have a T-shirt that I made up with JFO on it from Gary's stuff, that's superimposed over a NASA photo of the Earth from space, and I figured that was a good reminder. So speaking of reminders, so whenever I put that shirt on, it's like, oh yeah, everything I see on the whole planet is just another forgiveness opportunity. But you can use whatever adjective you like, of course.
Of course, of course.
However many expletives you want to add in there.
And as we practice what you're talking about, Bruce, it extends. What we're doing in here, it extends instead of creating more. What the world is all about is creating more disconnection, more ego, more, separation. So as we join together in love, in this, we're actually extending, and it's really, I can really sense that happening now in these. It's like your learning is my learning, and my learning is your learning, and all the other, it's just, it's like, it's not in. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And it kind of ties into that idea that, we in truth, the extension that you're talking about is really reflected in the idea that when you share an idea, you strengthen it. Whereas if you share something physical, it seems to be divided. Just like the cubicles in that dark maze, that you take this one light that's above the maze, above the battleground, and then you try to force it into where it doesn't belong in duality. And then you've got all these little separate selves and separate bodies and separate cubicles and separate houses and separate and it's pretty insane when you think of what we're trying to achieve with duality, and how it's it's doomed, but we don't have to take it seriously because it's a dream. And that's, I think, where the beauty of the course that ties into that thing that Ken was talking about. It's purposive because we can choose a different purpose. We can add to the Eastern mysticism that says that the illusion of separateness is silly, but the reason it's silly is because we never threw God under the bus. We never shattered perfect oneness. We never really made this dark maze or labyrinth of cubicles and quarantined homes and bodies and isolated, seemingly silly separate selves. It's just a humongous, unimaginably photorealistic, colossal, 3D holographic dream that we took seriously. and it seems to be a gigantic war, covered over by a veneer of civilization. But when we look at the ego, honestly, it's like, it's mean, ugly, and nasty, but it's a mean, ugly, nasty dream character. It's great special effects. I mean, the special effects that we have in this world, would put all the other CGI houses that make all the great movies with the amazing visuals and production values to shame, if even put them all together. And we're doing this 24/7 with our mind. And we, because our minds are so powerful, we believe that we actually pulled it off, and yet it's just this colossal dream. I mean, if you can think about that, it's like, I think that's why Jesus says, if I were to, take away your power of choice, that would be violating the most fundamental law there is, the law of cause and effect. Because once we realize that we always have the power to choose against the ego's insanity, then we're home free. That's because the locus of control is back in the mind, in our decision maker, and that choice to choose against the ego's insanity is always there, and to choose for the Holy Spirit is always there. And that's the same decision. Any other comments so far? Should we read a little more, or any other comments at this point? No? Okay. Anybody want to read? We read 3, right? Should we do paragraph 4? Anybody volunteer for that? On chapter 23, first section. Judy?
Brother, the war against yourself is almost over. The journey's end is at the place of peace. Would you not now accept the peace offered you here? This enemy you fought as an intruder on your peace is here transformed before your sight into the giver of your peace. Your enemy was God himself, to whom all conflict, triumph, and attack of any kind are all unknown. He loves you perfectly, completely, and eternally. The Son of God at war with his Creator. I'll start over again. The Son of God at war with his Creator is a condition as ridiculous as nature roaring at the wind in anger, proclaiming it as part of itself no more. Could nature possibly establish this and make it true? Nor is it up to you to say that what shall be part of you and what is kept apart. Nor is it up to you to say what shall be part of you and what is kept apart.
Any thoughts, Judy?
Well, an interesting thing happened to me. When I read, he loves you perfectly, completely, and eternally, I've been resisting the idea that I was afraid of love, especially in maybe these last couple of weeks. And when I read that, I thought, I don't think I'm going to be able to resist it anymore. Darn.
Yeah, I think looking at our resistance can be really helpful, and forgiving that. I worked with a dear friend named Leonard Lasco several years ago when I lived in Southern Oregon, and he would do workshops on forgiveness. And he wasn't really a course student per se in terms of his primary emphasis, but he was familiar with it. And but one of the things he did in his workshops that I thought was really cool was he said, well, he would take the specifics that people had forgiveness issues with and have people do work individually and dyadic work and that sort of thing. And a lot of good things come from that, but with the emphasis on getting back to the cause of the mind. But one of the things he said that stuck with me is maybe you're not ready to forgive yourself or another person. It really is ultimately, in my mind, if I'm having something that needs forgiveness.
Yeah.
But maybe I can forgive my resistance to whatever this
It's such an excellent suggestion.
Yeah. And that, I think that, and this kind of ties into what a couple lessons past this one, that 95, the willingness to forgive ourselves for our lapses in discipline and our lapses in mindfulness, is a huge part of it. It's just if we can, stop the condemnation of ourselves by whatever means, we're basically saying, I'm willing to suspend the war against myself. I'm willing to, and then Jesus says, do not fight yourself. And obviously, whenever we're fighting ourselves, guess which thought system is working. And we don't have to, the ego is always kind of confrontational and always tries to put up a fight. And so if something seems to be in our face, that's usually a clue as to which thought system it is. But the peace that comes there is gentle. It's never being pushed. It's always just like a lighthouse waiting patiently for us to notice the light.
Yeah.
I was reflecting on this is section 1, just before he launches into the laws of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, like in paragraph 3, he goes all Muji. This is nothing, nothingness, nothingness. And then in this paragraph, it's all silly, it's all ridiculous. Just don't even sweat it. And then he tells us what we think we did in those 5 laws of chaos.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and the laws of chaos, just are so much about trying to, take what's true and hide it, deny it, and then make up our own laws that have to do with oh, I'm always the victim of things, and you know, it's a warfare. The laws of warfare, isn't it? Yeah. The other thing that I noticed in that last paragraph was I was thinking that you know, how ridiculous it is. That's one of the words that was used. And if we can imagine, you know, perfect oneness, this, you know, it's unlimited light, if you will, metaphorically, and each of us seems to have, as seeming individuals, have broken off a little, you know, piece of that, we thought. And then it's kind of like, you know, pulling a dark hood over our heads, you know, the hoodwinked ourselves, and they say, well, where'd the light go? But we're all kind of doing the same thing, you know, stumbling around with you know, these hoods over our head, and wondering where the light went. But in truth, you know, that never happened. So it's almost like, if we were to use a metaphor, it'd be almost like those little seemingly separate selves would be like little microscopic dots in this giant ocean that, you know, are not even big enough to be atoms, you know, in that infinite ocean. And yet we think that somehow we pulled it off because our minds are powerful enough to make a shield that seems to not let in much light. But then he tells us, you know, maybe, you know, foolproof from the ego standpoint, but it's not God-proof. And there's always a little sliver of light, a little glimmer that, you know, we always know when we're not at peace that there's another way. I mean, even however dimly, we always know that there's a way to get out of it. And I think we know that there's a way to be a little bit more mindful all the time, and to be gentle with ourselves is I think a huge part of that, because that gentleness and the willingness to forgive ourselves lifts us above that battleground and pulls that will back off our eyes a little bit for each time. Anyone want to read the next one? Jean? Thanks. You're muted. Yeah. There you go.
The war against yourself was undertaken to teach the Son of God that he is not himself and not his Father's son. For this, the memory of his Father must be forgotten. It is forgotten in the body's life, and if you think you are a body, you will believe you have forgotten it. Yet truth can never be forgotten by itself, and you have not forgotten what you are. Only a strange illusion of yourself, a wish to triumph over what you are, remembers not.
Any thoughts on that, Jean?
I mean, to me, I guess it's the paragraph before this where, you know, it speaks of us being at war with our Creator is a condition as ridiculous as nature roaring at the wind in anger, proclaiming it as a part of itself no more. I mean, it's such a tool to bring us back to what, you know, that's so beautiful. And I forget that. I just forget it. And I hanker in that, you know, that I'm not myself and I'm not my Father's son. And I am. And it just, you know, it's just such a reminder. You know, we'll pick up a few phrases here where I'll remember. And it's lovely. It's just lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we really do forgive ourselves or forgive our resistance, you know, the peace is always there. The light is always there beyond the wool we've pulled over our own eyes, and even with the wool pulled seemingly fairly tightly, our basic essence is still light, even though we don't want to think that as egos, and so, you know, we can't completely extinguish that. So even these little seemingly dark specks bumping around in the darkness that we think we made up, you know, the happy inevitability is that we'll all wake up from that silliness. Yeah.
There was a Stephen King series called The Gunslinger, and they're sort of a samurai bunch, spiritual warriors stuff, and whenever somebody stepped out of their integrity as one of those warriors, as one of those gunslingers, the line was similar to line 3 here in paragraph 5. It is for, no, not that, 2. For this, the memory of his father must be forgotten. And in Stephen King's book, it was, if you stepped out of line, if you went off your path, you've forgotten the face of your father. You've forgotten the face of your father. You've forgotten the face of Christ. But certainly in respect to this, you forgot God. You forgot the memory of your father, which is another phrase for the Holy Spirit that Kenny certainly equates, that the memory of heaven, the memory of our Father is the Holy Spirit. But we've forgotten that face.
Yep. Kind of ties into the authority problem that the Course talks about. Is, we think we're these rebellious prodigals that, so John Wayne, I can do it on my own, kind of, persona, and yet every time we do that, if we're honest with ourselves, well, that hasn't really worked out that well. And all our little solitary battles, haven't really achieved what we thought they would. And of course, the ego likes to cover that up, and by ever shifting, facades, basically says, okay, let's well, that one didn't work, but let's try this one. Change the product of the day, and same sales pitch, but different merchandise and form, but the content's the same. And as long as it can make it seem like this is different, oh well, I haven't tried that permutation on the dream yet. Let me try that one, see if that works better. And of course, as silly egos, we try it, but there's a part of us that always knows, this might not work that well either. but we can, slowly but surely forgive ourselves.
And the exhaustion of that.
Oh yeah.
It really leads to thinking there is a better way, because it truly is. When I'm in exhaustion, I have to, it's almost like my clue to, there is this better way.
Just stop for a moment and listen to that inner kindness teacher and just say, okay, Holy Spirit, what would you like me to consider or not consider, as the case might be?
Going back to that True Color song, when I hear those young people singing it to me, and I'm visualizing Jesus singing it. It's like the sense of relief that Jesus sees the face of Christ in me. He sees the true color, and I don't have to work at all this darkness. I can just lay it down. I can put the sword down. I can put the phony me down.
Exactly. Yeah, and as you're sharing that, Tim, just now, I was flashing on something I remember doing years ago before I ever heard of the Course, and in fact, it might have been pretty early in metaphysical pursuits or whatever. I remember not too long after high school, even I would pick up my high school yearbook, and I would look at all the people in the class that I went to school with, and there was some part of me that knew that there was this perfect essence. And then among them were people that at the time I had misgivings about. A couple of my friends had stuffed me in a trash can when I was a kid. Just stuff like that. And that's and I looked at yeah, and then there's behind that there's a call for love. And even though I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I knew that there was some redeeming quality. There was something beyond that. And over the years, every once in a while I'd run across that book and I'd pull it out, and the quality and the feeling of being able to release my projections got a little deeper each time, if that makes sense. Just kind of looking at all the people that I thought, and then of course another thing that reaffirmed it too was going to a couple of high school reunions, and some of the people I thought were what was I thinking about them? They actually turned out to be pretty nice, And it's amazing how somehow, that some of those things, the rough edges get worn off, and then you realize, hey, they were actually pretty nice folks, But I, at the time, I had, a different opinion. But I think we can again use those anything that crosses our path as a way to look at, you know, what am I projecting? What am I thinking about everyone right now? And what am I able to undo if I can use the current grievances as a way to get back to the mind and ask Holy Spirit to, you know, see it differently. And you know, drop the war. Look at the sword. Look at the flamethrower and saying, "Whoa, when did I pick that up again?" the least.
Well, I'm still stuck on being put in a trash can. That's such a great metaphor for like what we did to ourselves. We stuffed ourselves in a trash can, and my friends did it to me. It wasn't even my enemies; it was my friends.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it. Thank you for that, Tim. I have worked through that a few times, you know, and it's not something that I think about a lot, but every once in a while I'll you know, think things like that. And it's like, oh yeah. But anyway, that's a great, you know, metaphor as well as an opportunity. Yes.
Hey, Tim, the ironic thing is I paid them both to do it.
No, Dave, you're off the hook on that because that was before I knew you. So that was pre-7th grade.
Kidding, just kidding.
You're off the hook on that one.
Okay, cool.
Anyone for the next paragraph?
I'll read it.
Okay.
The war against yourself is but the battle of two illusions, struggling to make them different from each other, in the belief the one that conquers will be true. There is no conflict between them and the truth, nor are they different from each other. Both are not true. And so it matters not what form they take. What made them is insane, and they remain part of what made them. Madness holds out no menace to reality and has no influence upon it. Illusions cannot triumph over truth, nor can they threaten it in any way. And the reality that they deny is not a part of them. That reminds me of the atonement that says nothing not of God can affect us in any way. Nothing not of God can affect us in any way.
Exactly.
And the war against the self, the one that is believing I'm the home of sickness, darkness, sin, whatever, the one that's believing it is as illusory of what it is, what it believes. They're, you know, he's just saying they're both illusions. Mm-hmm. The you that's making it is nothing, and the nothing it's making is nothing. It's, as Tim said, it's all nothing, nothing, nothing. Yeah. Our only choice is to choose to go beyond it.
Yeah.
You know,
it doesn't matter what side of the illusory fence the dream figures seem to be on, does it?
Nope. And we can't bring them together. I mean, the two worlds don't meet. There's no way to bring that together, which is, you know, a common attempt of psychology somehow, but it just never works. There is only one way, and it's another way. It's different than all the ways we've tried.
Right. Yeah, exactly. As you were sharing that, I was thinking a couple of things. One is that, you know, the cognitive dissonance that the Course uses, unlike probably a lot of other psychotherapy approaches, is it doesn't try to reconcile illusions.
Right.
I mean, illusion A equals illusion B equals illusion C ad infinitum. Right. There's really no point in, you know, trying to make dream characters figure it all out on that level. But there is a point in choosing away from the dream to reality, and that's through forgiveness. I think that's what Jesus is saying. In any given moment, you can use the specific illusions that seem to be at war with each other, and use that as a memory jog device to get back to the mind and say, "Oh, I could take Jesus's rope ladder from his eternal helicopter and climb up above whatever battleground I think I'm in, and see it a little differently, and just see the silliness of warring parts. Another thing that came to mind as you were sharing that, Lynn, was a couple of years ago, or 5 years ago, I guess, when the movie Inception came out. Shortly after that, I wrote a little blog post on ACIM blog about Inception. In fact, a couple of them, because it triggered so many interesting ideas that related to the course of metaphysics. And about that time, I had run across this YouTube video of this lady named singer named Fiona Apple, and I'll share the link. And she did a version of George Harrison's song, "Nothing's Going to Change My World." And in this video, it's really pretty cool. I mean, talk about the calm center of the cyclone. In this video, metaphorically, she's singing this song in this old diner. And this diner apparently has been, the way they probably set up the music videos, they probably found this place that was scheduled for demolition. And then they had, they had all these people coming in with wrecking equipment and crowbars and just smashing the crap out of the place, basically. And all this broken glass and stuff, and everything was flying around. And she's just placidly singing. And it doesn't suggest on the level of form that, when the world is crazy, you don't do anything. But I think that inwardly, if we can remember to be calm and to remember that there's a peaceful center in spite of, all the busy doings and the stuff in the world that we're so engaged in, that we can remember just to find that center of peace and that place of calm, no matter what seems to be going on, and then practice that more and more and generalize that. It starts to kick in more frequently, and that can be.
Yeah, as we talked about when we did chapter 5, the end of chapter 5, Time and Eternity. It says you're only in time because you believe you're in time, but you can step into eternity anytime you want to. It's always there, just like peace is always there, just like everything we could ever want is always there. But we keep the war going just so that we can keep healing apart.
Check out Barnes. He's in the middle of a whole swirling cosmos. He's fine.
Wow.
He's got the whole thing spinning around his head. He's fine.
Galactic Barnes. Any comments, Barnes?
I think that's NGC 2906 Galaxy.
Cool.
All right.
Taken from the Hubble.
Neat.
That's
It
cool.
doesn't like you're boldly going where no one has gone before. Let's see. Do you have time for one more paragraph?
Bruce, will you send the Fiona Apple link?
I sure will. Yeah,
link?
It's a fun one. Yeah.
I was reading about her yesterday. So
really?
She's got a new album out.
Oh, okay.
Which is supposedly outstanding. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I think you'll like it. And maybe you could send the True Colors link when you run across it. Yeah, that'd be fun. Anyone else for another paragraph? I think we.
As a plug for the seminar this weekend, if you go to the website and you pull up the post on the seminar, that video is on. I put it on that post.
Perfect.
So it's right at the top of all the posts. It's the Saturday seminar, and that video is on that post.
Excellent. Well, tell you what, how about if we go to, it's in chapter 5. One of the ones that we didn't read the other day in chapter 5, that might make a good meditation. And let's see, page 83, I think it is. Yeah, here we go. This is one that we have a Wednesday online study group, and this will be familiar to Dave and Jonathan because we usually read this as a closing meditation, or frequently do. So how about take a moment and we'll close our eyes and relax and let this soak in. How can
Thanks,
you
Bruce.
who are...
You want to give the page reference to that?
Oh, sure. It's page 83, and this is chapter 5, and section 4, paragraph 8, the last paragraph before section 5. So, how can you who are so holy suffer? All your past, except its beauty, is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindnesses and every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know what God creates is eternal. You can indeed depart in peace because I've loved you as I love myself. You go with my blessing and for my blessing. Hold it and share it, that it may always be ours. I place the peace of God in your heart and in your hands to hold and share. The heart is pure to hold it, and the hands are strong to give it. We cannot lose. My judgment is as strong as the wisdom of God, in whose heart and hands we have our being. His quiet children are his blessed sons. The thoughts of God are with you. Thank you all.
On a quick note, that paragraph you just read, the way Ken describes that, he, especially in terms of this idea of Jesus singing to us, he describes that paragraph as the first time in the course where Jesus is singing to us. He calls it an aria. Jesus does that a lot in chapter 8, but this is the first time Ken thought he was actually kind of singing this paragraph to us.
Oh, neat. I hadn't heard that part before. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Quite the symphony. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks, Bruce. Look
Thanks,
forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.